course, we have our guest of honor from France. France is a partner country today. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. We have a great list of panelists with us, and very relevant question about European neighborhood. I think this is more than relevant, particularly when we were observing what was happening during the last weekend in Moldova, for instance, but not only. I have a pleasure to welcome to the panel three distinguished guests, and I hope that you will join me in welcoming them. To my right is Minister of Foreign Affairs of Lithuania, Mr. Kęstutis Budrys. Pleasure to have you with us. I could say that you represent a new union, where, like Ben represents the old union, and Ararat represents the future union. But we'll discuss about it, and we'll see if it's true and if it's achievable. So I said that to your right is Minister of Foreign Affairs of Armenia and a good friend, and he's very experienced minister. And Ararat, I would say that you have quite big accomplishments on your duty. What we've seen recently in August in White House peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I think this is something that wouldn't happen without skillful diplomacy in Armenia. So pleasure to have you, Ararat, with us. And as I mentioned, the old union is also represented here in a very young spirit and very promising, already very successful politician and good friend of mine, Ben Haddad. It's a pleasure to have you here, Ben. And it's not the first time that you are here. And each time you come, you get promotion. I don't know if it's because you visit Warsaw or is it work at home? Let's say that's because of coming to Warsaw. So maybe that's the reason why we have more and more prominent guests coming to the Warsaw Security Forum. But more seriously speaking, the question about European neighborhood policy, I would say, is more relevant than ever. Because these days, our values are tested. These days, our adversaries and sometimes also our allies are asking us what our unity, what our alliances are built on. Are they built on interests, or are they built on values, on both, or only just one of them? Sometimes when I hear about transactionist policy, I'm questioning, do we still have two pillars, the common interests and common values? And European Union, by the founding fathers, was built on those values. Also to avoid disagreements, also to avoid conflicts. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we have privilege to have with us representatives of three different perspectives of European integration. Old Union represented by Ben Haddad, the new union represented by Minister Budrys, and the future member of the European Union, potentially represented by Minister Mիրզոյանը, together with our Lithuanian colleague, of course. So let me ask a few questions to you based on those brief introductory remarks and perspective. So my first question will come to Ben, because you represent the old union. So Ben, what do you think? Can Europe still come up with an idea for a new strategy towards enlargement and its neighborhood policy? And I'm asking specifically you in the first place, because French voice was quite often very complicated in this manner. So what would you say as a representative of old union? Is it possible to have enlargement?
You know, in my office, I didn't put much because it's a pretty precarious job, so you shouldn't get too attached to furniture. But I did bring one poster that I bought in Sarajevo a few years ago. And it says, "Europe, wake up, Sarajevo is calling you." And it shows Europe as a woman who's asleep with an EU flag on her pin. And unfortunately, I feel it's still very much relevant. 30 years ago, exactly this year, we had a genocide on European soil in Bosnia. And we at the time were completely unable to stop it. We had to bring in the Americans. I often remind people that Bosnia, the Western Balkans, is closer to France than Ukraine is, at the heart of Europe. And at the time, there was this, I think, denial. You know, there's one expression I don't like is when people say war is back on the European continent with Ukraine. The truth is it never left. We had the Cold War that divided Europe and left tens of millions of people behind the Iron Curtain and under Soviet totalitarianism. Then, of course, we had the Western Balkans in the 90s, then we had Georgia in 2008, then the annexation of Crimea in 2014. But we always, or at least some of us, convinced ourselves that it was sort of old hatreds resurfacing, that it was ancient history, anachronism, and that the path was, of course, towards peace and prosperity for Europeans. And there was a brutal awakening with February 24th, 2022. First, of course, the Russian war of aggression and our need to defend Ukraine. And 3.5 years into the war, we're still, I think, united and strong in our support, economic, like military, for the heroic Ukrainian resistance. But we also realized that we cannot leave other areas of our continent as gray zones for future conflicts, aggression, or interference. And this is why, more than ever, we need to re-engage with our neighbors. Bring them closer to European institutions, and even re-engage with those who have left. Because if you think of the work we're doing on the Coalition the Willing for Ukraine and the European political community, it's also a way to re-anchor our British friends to the European security architecture. And I think you're right that for a long time in France, there was a form of skepticism towards enlargement. Why? Because it was seen as maybe a dilution of the decision-making process in Europe and as making it more complicated to have a European power emerge. And I think if you look at 10 years later, 20 years later, not only is Europe stronger because it's larger, because you have countries like Poland who are incredible economic drivers of growth, of innovation, and countries that take security matters so seriously. But also, beyond that, it was a reunification of our continent. And I think it's bringing a new sense of spirit and energy. When I look at Ukraine on the Maidan, or Georgia more recently, when you have kids who are ready to die for the EU flag, think about how sometimes jaded we are in Europe about the EU, what it's brought to our continent. And I think the European spirit comes much more from these candidate countries than where people are ready to risk their lives for Europe, than it comes sometimes from some of the office space in Brussels. And so for all these reasons, whether it's geopolitical stability, whether it's the economic opportunity of expanding our internal market at a time where we're under economic pressure and competition from sometimes our closest allies, or whether it's about bringing a sense of renewed spirit and energy to this European project, yes, we need enlargement and we need to re-engage with our neighbors. And if I can add a last word, because we're talking about the EU, but one of the things that I'm very glad that was mentioned also on this panel is the European political community. And for a long time, we were big believers on the idea that we need a platform where we can engage the entire continent, where we can talk about interconnection, where we could talk about political dialogue, where we could talk about infrastructure, from digital infrastructure and roaming, for example, on the continent, to energy connectivity. And it's certainly not, it's never been an alternative to enlargement, but it's a way to accompany it through concrete projects without having to wait necessarily for all the work of the very demanding merit-based process of enlargement. I think the two clearly go hand in hand.
Ben, I have to, you provoked me. What about Turkey? You said about neighbors that we have to be inclusive. What about Turkey joining European Union?
As you know, Turkey is a member of the European political community, and I think it's very important actually to have these dialogues with Turkey. I think it's an important strategic partner of the European Union, and I do think we have a lot of interest in common. I think when it comes to the candidacy to the European Union, it's a different matter, and you look at just realism tells you where it is in the last 20 years that it's been basically stalling. But I do think that the EU needs to be very engaged with strategic partners, and Turkey is one of them clearly, both in the Middle East and the Black Sea.
Do you think that Turkey could be a member of the European Union in the foreseeable future?
I don't think Turkey could be a member in the foreseeable future.
Okay, thank you very much. So now let's switch to our Lithuanian neighbor. Perspective, actually the same question, but from the perspective of a new member state. I remember myself studying in Vienna 2004, and my French professor actually at that time was saying something like this, and he was working in European Commission. Well, he didn't know that I was sitting as a Pole among the students, and he was saying, this enlargement, very risky, and those Poles, they are terrible, they just join and are making so much noise, so critical, so radical. And actually, who was advocating me? My best colleague from university, he was a Turk. And he said something like this: Professor, if not this crazy, strange Poles, you all would go to mosques these days in Europe. And he said it in Vienna. For those that are interested in history, you know that Poles stopped Ottoman Empire from getting closer to Europe. But what do you think, Budris, about it? What is the, or maybe Baltic states' perspective on enlargement and neighborhood policy of the European Union?
Thank you, Zbigniew. When you addressed me as the representative of New Europe or New European Union member, I feel like sometimes I'm addressed as a young man, but I'm all gray and I'm 45. So I'm asking myself, so when I won't be young anymore? So same with the new member. 21 years of membership, still new member. So you see, it's a long way even after the membership to be admitted as the old one. But without joking and remembering this division, the new and old members, and we remember that was Iraq, and there were some of the remarks coming to the new members actually of EU and NATO. Then it was the clear division, at least as it was described, towards the approach to the United States, towards approach to Russia, towards approach to the other continents and countries, and it was different. So we didn't see then Russia as someone that can be Europeanized or the country that can transform itself because of the more increased trade with Russia. We haven't seen Americans out of European affairs, because for us then, and it is the case now, it looked like the very strategic thing to have two pillars, as we described then 20 more years ago in our national security strategy, United States and NATO. And now, after those 20 years, I think that then is a new European Union as we are, because we are so on the same page what is needed geopolitically. And I'm really admired by the initiatives of France, of President Macron, towards coalition of the willing, towards the enlargement as such, and leaning forward. That is what we needed, and I see that there is no naivety towards Russia anymore, and we see that transatlantic cooperation and partnership is so much needed. So those old division lines are non-existent. What would be in the future, we will see. But what I see as also the very understandable and common approach towards enlargement, that is very needed component of European Union becoming geopolitical actor. Without enlargement, it won't happen. When we talk about enlargement for us, first of all, that's Ukraine. And it is in our very deep interest to have Ukraine with us in European Union, and then to finish with the enlargement that was started already, and then we will go the next phase, rethinking what is our neighborhood. I don't think...
Have you seen, Budrys, when President Zelensky was speaking today in the morning, he made a reference that we want to join alliance of the European Union, and he didn't mention NATO today in the morning.
It is building already, and with the additional elements now, with the defense industry first, now with the SAFE initiative and defense capabilities, and we will see in the next MFF after 28, there will be more and more hard security, defense things and matters within the European Union. So then, looking towards more to the east, I don't agree that Armenia is a neighborhood of Europe. I think geopolitically it is Europe. It is now a neighborhood of European Union as an organization, and we have to act as one unity towards it. What I mean by this is that we talk a lot about being geopolitical actor, but we do not act as being geopolitical actors. So you have to describe your strategic interest and go for it and implement it. And that's why enlargement, and I'm talking about the stability in all the continent, is not so much about values as being something that you can choose, this or that. It's about the very deep fundamental interest. And primary interest, that's security. So Ukraine membership in EU, that's security. For us, that is why it is high. Stability, and then in the future, there are more members, and also with the Armenia's interest, that is our security. And security not because we will become allies, but because countries, through enlargement, go through a process that we call Europeization, becoming European. What does it mean? It means building strong democracies, building strong institutions, and it's very important in our case that it was building resilience. Building resilience to the country that don't believe in all of it, that it would work. Because for Russia, all the undemocratic regimes are the ones that they know how to deal with. They know how to penetrate. They love kleptocracies, because they know how to operate within the kleptocracies, and they have difficulties with democracies. So this is why, for me, it is less about values. I do not deny it, but for me, it's the primary interest, as it is for Lithuania, to have the democratic, stable, friendly neighborhood. And we can go through the map.
So you say Ukraine, yes, Armenia, no, Moldova.
I'm not saying Armenia, no, I didn't say that. Geopolitical, I'm looking into the map and where we are right now. And of course, when it is the choice to go European Union, it's not like choosing between the organization. It's the very difficult process. You went through it, Lithuania went through it, and we were going through it after the membership. What does it mean to make the environment as the same, regulated in the same way as elsewhere for business, for example?
So what would you recommend your government if Armenia would decide to apply?
We are supporting this path forward. We just had the meeting with the minister, and we just talked to it. I believe in it because of the many advantages and that you will achieve.
The Europeization process.
Yeah, through the process. Resilience, first of all. What we are talking when we're talking about the energy security, for example, connections, transport, connections, same regulation. We will have same regulation. We will have the opportunity also to open our markets. Open markets, that will be the huge opportunities for investment and for trade. It goes like this. And I know one country that would love to prevent all of this. That's Russia, obviously.
Of course, that's true. Luckily, we were able, supporting the democratic processes in Moldova, that they were resistant from these incursions in their democratic processes. And this is really inspiring, I would say. That's something very positive.
And you should measure by the resources that Russia dedicated for these elections in Moldova. How many hundreds of millions they invested into it. This shows how high it is.
1.5% GDP of Moldova, that's the value of it. That's what we are talking. Mr. Mիրզոյան, you know that I'm an enthusiast of Armenia and strong supporter. After listening to your predecessors, what do you expect from Europe, from European Union in this area? And what is maybe your experience dealing with European Union in this area?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for your introductory remarks. I don't think I deserve those words, but you were probably too kind.
You're a diplomat, very modest.
Well, I'm not a diplomat, by the way. I don't have any diplomatic background. So I'm sorry to say this, dear colleagues. I think there is certain confusion here. We speak about old EU. Well, first of all, are we speaking about Europe or the European Union? These are different things. Because when you speak about European Union, we can be the potential member, the next one. If you speak about Europe, then Minister is absolutely right. We are in Europe equally as you. We also spoke a little bit about New Europe and Old Europe. We spoke about values versus interests. I here should disagree with you, dear friend. I think interests are values. I mean, values should be the interest, because if you allow yourself to align your policies with interests you think that they are beneficial for you, then you make a compromise, a backstep from your values one day, the second day, third day, and then you see yourself in a situation where maybe your real policies are far from values. Yes, EU, for me, from a side, is primarily about democracy and human rights. If you make compromises, if you close your eyes about the, I don't know, situations regarding human rights in this country and then the other one, then well, at least EU will become less interesting for me personally. I mean, less attractive for me personally. And in this sense as well, Armenia is even EU in this sense of democracy. We have already, yes, unexperienced democracy, but we are already an acknowledged democracy. And of course, we will be continuing our democratic reforms. So this dilemma of interests versus values is a trap, I think, is an artificial positioning of the question.
Mr. Mիրզոյան, let me just give you a hint what I had in mind saying that.
I'm sorry if you...
Sorry for me, because I maybe was not precise. You know, I was making reference to the American foreign policy these days, to the speech of J.D. Vance in Munich at the Munich Security Conference, when he said that Europe is a source of problems for Europe. And when US government decided to dissolve US aid and abandon soft power of US, it was, in my opinion, a bit betraying the values that US was built on and focusing on transactionism and just interests. But in this transactional policy, the risk is that someone could make a better offer. And then you are in a many.
Exactly what I'm talking about.
You are in many, and for smaller countries, it's a pretty risky to be in this very transactional relation. But just, sorry, it was just an explanation.
I am sorry if I got additional confusion here. But yes, you're right. Lots of things are going around Europe's strategic neighborhood. And yes, we can start from the United States. We see that the strongest ally and partner and friend of EU and EU member states, now they have, on very critical issues, they can have slightly or fundamentally different opinions. So this makes, I think, and again, this is aside from aside, this makes EU rethink many things. For instance, increase the sovereignty. This may be, and build some institutions which can give additional confidence to EU as a union. If you look to the east, Europe sees itself as at high risk when it comes to the war in Ukraine. I saw the news recent days about the violation of airspace. So many things are going around EU and Europe, and there are very important things to rethink, at least reassess. But not. I don't want to focus only on the negative things. There are also positive processes happening in the world as well. And here I would like to focus on South Caucasus. on Armenia. We just established peace with Azerbaijan. It was declared in Washington. Also, the ministers, the declaration of peace was signed between my prime minister and president of Azerbaijan. The declaration was witnessed and signed also by President Trump. In parallel, we, the ministers, we initialed the peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan. We agreed upon recognizing each other's territorial integrity, the borders. We agreed upon general principles in frames of which the transport infrastructure should be unblocked between two countries. So I'm saying this to show, this declaration and establishment of peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan is not merely, it does not merely mean stability or elimination of a gray zone in close neighborhood of EU. It also provides some new economic trade opportunities. Imagine when the railway connection is re-established between Armenia and Azerbaijan, this will have significance not only that part of the world, but a much larger region, including EU. But again, it's not the limit. Establishment of peace in South Caucasus provides South Caucasian countries to strengthen their sovereignties, to decrease their dependence from other major capitals, and gives us opportunity to have, for instance, foreign policies. I would be very specific. We in Armenia, we could adopt in the National Assembly a law making the EU accession a mandatory policy of the government of Republic of Armenia. So from our side, there is a political will, there is a decision fixed, constituted in a law, and now the EU colleagues should decide.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the Caucasian perspective. And having a kind of follow-up to what you said about peace deal signed in the White House, why not in Europe? We could we say on many occasions that we have like new momentums for Europe. Even when we decide to talk about European autonomy, there is no. We can talk about it different way when we were using this phrase like a decade ago. Then it was usually mainly a French narrative about a bit of autonomy from US. Right now we are talking about Europe on its own simply being self-sufficient because the realities are like that. And it's not necessarily anti-American. It means that we need to take care about our own security. So on one side we say that we have a momentum for Europe, but on another side, we have this war, which is happening in our neighborhood, which is somehow a reaction. Supposedly this is the Russian propaganda, that it's a reaction to the promotion of European values or European style of life. Do you think that right now, when we have this war at our border, it's easier to promote European values? And do you think that currently we are winning with Russia in these narratives?
When you are following, if you are following Russian narratives, you would see yourself as the losers. We are done here, and it's nothing to do for us, and that's only United States left on the Western side. So I wouldn't fall into it. Because for Lithuania, we were decades of the lost country, and it's like absolutely backyard of Europe that has nothing to do with success. But it is an opposite. So of course we are, presented in the light that Russia needs for itself. I think that this is it was the momentum and still is the momentum for Europe. More opportunity than something that would provide the outcome inevitably. No, we have to use this opportunity for stronger decision making, and we cannot allow ourselves to lose our focus. And the focus for Europe's security in upcoming years, that is in Ukraine. Absolutely. If we are not we are not achieving the long-lasting peace in Ukraine, if Ukraine is not going into EU, we cannot speak about the enlargement seriously. It won't happen because we will have more problems internally. So I think this is the top priority. On the other hand, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't work in many directions. And one of the countries that we are not mentioning, but it is hanging in the air when we are talking about the South Caucasus, that is Georgia, where they are. And we have the candidate country with association agreement and with democracy going down and deteriorating fastly. And one of the reasons was that we missed the momentum when it was there for Europe to act. We thought, maybe it's okay. No, it's not okay. And we see how it escalates into that direction. So I think we have to be aware, we have to be vigilant, and we have to act united. And here we are on the different, absolutely, pace than the United States. They have the centralized decision-making process. On our side, it is complicated. We even need the United States to make our sanctions policy more robust. We need the United States to convince some of our European partners about the energy imports from Russia. This is how we fail on some of the strategic elements right now. So if we are not using this opportunity, that will be more and more difficult to mobilize ourselves.
Thank you very much, Budris. Ben, well, in Armenia, this is your government that is trying to help with the modernization of Armenian army. You are present there. You are trying to help them in their navigation towards Euro-Atlantic community. But at the same time, as I mentioned before, Armenia and Azerbaijan, they decide to look for American support, not European countries' support when signing a peace agreement. Do you think that this is, it should be frustrating for Europeans that it's not, it didn't happen in Brussels, for instance, or Paris?
No, look, we support the peace agreement that was found with the U.S. administration. And I think, it's a testament actually to the courage of the Armenian government that's been into a very difficult situation over the last few years and has continued to engage courageously in diplomacy and looking for peace, and also continue to engage in reforms. And support for democracy, the fight against corruption, the Pashinyan government really is to be praised on this. And we speak to the Armenian government on a regular basis, President Macron with Prime Minister Pashinyan, and we will be there to support the implementation of this peace agreement. Really, I think the key will be making sure that it's implemented in the long run. And I think, when we talk about the neighborhood, we talk about the Russian threat against not only, of course, the war against Ukrainians, but the general threat that represents to European democracies. We've seen the unacceptable drone incursions into the Polish, Baltic, Romanian airspace in the last few weeks. We see the constant threat even on France, the disinformation, the interference, the cyber attacks against our infrastructure, against our hospitals. On the other hand, we have the trade pressure coming from the United States and the questions about the future of the security relationship with the US in the long run. And I think what's key here is for us, when we talk about strategic autonomy, to really focus on everything we can do at the European level to reduce our dependencies. And this is where, not only at the EU level, but of course, with the neighborhoods, the candidates, the different countries of the European continent, in terms of reducing our energy dependencies, of supporting our innovation sector, our tech, think about AI, quantum, green tech, space, of deepening the single market. I think this is where our continent is an incredible source of resources and opportunity if we want to grow and assume ourselves as a power and reduce our dependencies to others. And by the way, because you were talking about the question of whether autonomy was against or not the US, we never saw it as against the US. It hasn't changed. It was never against the US.
That's called diplomacy.
But
to say it straightforward.
No, but the question is, look at, I spent 7 years in the US under 3 different administrations. And you listen to Democrats like Republicans. They ask Europeans to increase their defense spending, to take more ownership of their own security, to rise. And I'm convinced that as we have not only a EU, but a European continent that takes more ownership of its own history, of its own strategic identity, that's the way we will reshape and rebuild a transatlantic alliance. They'll be more mature and more balanced, and that will be beneficial for both sides of the Atlantic.
Thank you, Ben. Mr. Mիրզոյան, we have 1 minute, and I want to make a reference to Georgia, which was a huge hope from Europe about the future of Georgia, Europeization of Georgia. I remember President Saakashvili being here at the Warsaw Security Forum, receiving the Knight of Freedom Award. And what lessons can Armenia have from the story of Georgia? What we can do to help you to avoid mistakes that Georgia did, or we did, what mistakes we did, that Georgia is in the situation which it is. And President Salomea is here at the Warsaw Security Forum with us, and her mission, dedication, it's a challenge for us. What we can do to help you to secure the future of democratic Armenia and Euro-Atlantic Armenia?
Well, the fact is that no one cancelled Georgia's status of candidate, neither Georgians nor EU. So the fact is that Georgia is a EU candidate. The rest is a matter of interpretation, I don't know, ongoing political processes that can change one day, but strategically the status is there. So a lesson for Armenia, I would largely agree with my dear colleague from Lithuania. We should not lose momentum. Sometimes, and here again, soft criticism, we should not allow bureaucracy to take over the political decisions. Politics is the area, the way where our nations, our country should make decisions. Politically, EU should decide. Armenia, we will be continuing our reforms. We will be strengthening our democratic institutions. We will be raising the standards for our goods to make the integration possible. At the end of the day, the decision should be political. If you, as EU, let us in, then all of us, we will benefit. If you say no to us, then we will still have reformed political institutions. We will benefit from it as well. So, yes, we should be more bolder, more political, less bureaucratic. But there is a nuance that I would like to, I see that the time is almost over, but I want to reflect, if I may. So the mediation or facilitation, a peace deal between Armenia and Azerbaijan, it's not a matter of competition, I mean, there was a long process, the negotiations have taken several years. Political leaders, they have been involved. President Macron organized a meeting on the margins of the European political community in Prague. It was several years ago, on 6th of October, and this was the meeting where a very fundamental agreement was reached between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Agreement about acknowledgement of territorial integrity of each other on the basis of 1991 Alma-Ata Declaration, which in its turn means that Armenia is in the borders between Soviet Armenia and Soviet Azerbaijan now are recognized, re-acknowledged as borders between current Armenia and current Azerbaijan. This was the fundamental milestone accomplishment. And
is it the next European Policy Committee taking place in Armenia?
So yeah, I'm saying this to also show that this European political community summit is very important mechanism, very important platform, and we're proud to say that the next one will take place in Armenia on 4th of May 2026. So we will be waiting for all of you there.
I believe that the same members of the panel will
Next
be
one is on Wednesday in Copenhagen, and then...
Absolutely, I'm sorry. Copenhagen, and then it's spring in Armenia.
Exactly. So thank you very much to all of you, and I truly believe that we should continue this discussion in Yerevan during the European Political Committee, or Yerevan Dialogue that we have as Pulaski Foundation pleasure to be a partner. So we invite all of you to visit Yerevan, and I think it would be the gesture and proof in action that we are open for our neighbors and we support them, particularly when they take brave steps towards Euro-Atlantic community to share the same values. And I think this is the role that we have, not to leave them alone in this effort, because it's a difficult path, complicated, and they need our political and all the other ways of support. So thank you very much, and I hope that you will join me in applauding our great families.